All right, and welcome to the Promethei section of the Egyptian drill. Now, the Egyptian drill is a variation of the bow drill, which we just went over. It has a few differences, but basically you'll see that most things are the same. But first of all, before we begin, we have to give credit to a man whom I've never met. And his name is John Olson. And the story goes is that around 2001, at a place called the Winter Count, which is a gathering of primitive skills and primitive technology, and they're really good gatherings where you get a lot of information. There's a lot of sharing and things like that. Well, apparently Mr. Olson had been researching how the bow drill is done in Egypt, and brought that knowledge to the Winter Count and started to teach everybody there and disseminate that information. And we're going to go into detail as to kind of how that works when we go over the basic part, the science of it, when we do the equation from right to left, as you're now familiar with. But another thing I want to do is give credit previously for the bow drill for a couple things. One is Dan Stanchfield, who I used to teach with, was particularly helpful in clarifying for us at the school the real difference between solid bows and flexible bows. So, and the other thing too was he clarified for us some better knowledge on the natural cordages and how they're specifically used for bow drill. And it's one thing to make a cordage, it's another for it to be bow drill quality, which he really was a big help in with his research and findings and sharing all that with us. So thanks, Dan. And thank you, Mr. John Olson, whom I've never met, for showing the world, giving back some knowledge about something that was lost a long time ago, the Egyptian drill, which I'm going to do my best to show you folks. Okay? Here's a couple of things that we're going to go over. We're now going to jump into the basic science of it and get more specific. But let me say too that if you remember from the bow drill, there's a couple woods we didn't get for a coal. I think there were sassafras, chestnut, maybe the swamp maple. There was no coal. There was that black gritty stuff. Well, here we're going to address how to get those work with the Egyptian drill. The key factors that help get that going. Okay, with that one problem, that one issue. All right. Now the Jonka numbers, if you remember, the hardness test, where you fire a steel ball into wood and see how far it goes. Now, obviously, I don't do that here, and my numbers won't be exactly specific or anything like that, but the numbers will be close according to what I know, literally from what I gather on the internet. But their hardnesses are kind of obvious once you work with different kinds of woods. And now we're moving from bow drill woods, which kind of are a medium hardness, to things that are really, really hard. And like the sassafras, the chestnut, the swamp maple, they're starting to run into those numbers where they're really, the Jonka number is really high, and it's harder to get a coal because the woods are really, really hard. And therefore we need to apply more pressure. That's right. So the Egyptian drill is good for that, balancing that principle, which we're going to go over. All right, I'll show you all my devices and how they work and the techniques involved, and let's go. All right. All right, and welcome to Science of the Basic Form of the Egyptian drill. There's three main differences in the Egyptian drill compared to the bow drill. One is that it must be a solid bow, which I'm going to go over next. A solid bow is because you're applying so much pressure, okay, to get this fire going. A flexible bow and one turn of the cord going around the spindle is probably not going to cut it sometimes. So the bow will flex, and that'll give that'll lose tension on the cord, which only goes around the spindle once, and the cord can slip, or your bow just can't really apply the back and forth speed that you need sometimes with applying all that pressure with the pressure hand brace. So a solid bow is going to keep the tension much better than a flexible bow will. And the other aspect is the cord itself. The cord is going to be much longer. In fact, the cord is going to be at least twice the length of your bow. So if your cord goes from one end to the other and then back again, you have at least the length that you need. Sometimes you need a little bit more, but it needs to be at a minimum of twice the length of your bow. Okay? Because what's going to happen is this cord is going to wrap around multiple times around the spindle to get more friction on the spindle. So the point being that if the cord only goes around once, it may not have the friction to stay. So, but if it's wrapped around multiple times, it's not going to go anywhere. Okay, it's going to really turn the spindle because of all that pressure that's being applied. The cord being bound around the spindle so much is really going to turn the spindle. Whereas if it's just one turn, the cord may slip like that. So the other thing is the spindle itself. The spindle needs to be a lot taller. So you can't have one of these short spindles because the cord is really wrapped around multiple times, like at least 6 times, usually more. So, and that needs to like really ride up and down, all right? Not to mention that because it's wrapped around so many times, your bow is going to be held on an angle because the cord is going to be coming off down below the spindle and up high on the spindle, okay? So the cord wrapped downward goes toward the back of the bow, and the cord wrapped upward, up the spindle, goes toward the tip of the bow, okay? And the bow is held on an angle like this as it goes back and forth. So it's necessary that the spindle be, one, very tall, and second, it has to be very stable. It has to be a really solid spindle that's definitely not going to take audio on you. It's not going to break at all. One of the reasons why you do an Egyptian drill to begin with is because the wood is of a hardness that's harder to do with a regular bow drill. So you're applying a lot of pressure. And with all that obvious pressure on a bipolar nature, with the unilateral force going that way, that would definitely break if the spindle is not stable enough, is not solid enough. So when you're doing the Egyptian drill, usually you're working with a really, really solid spindle that's not going to break to begin with. But the key thing too is that it has to be really tall. It has to be at least, I'd say, 7 inches at a minimum, okay? And this is 8. As I said, I measured before from my thumb to my little finger. Okay, so let's go over bows. Now, again, my favorite bow is my thick bamboo. Okay, and that comes off very thick bamboo planks like this, ones that are used for making Japanese bows and arrows. It's called a yumi. Bow in Japanese is yumi. So to make a yumi, you need very thick bamboo. And these are some of the bamboos that are used for that purpose. But here, for friction fire keeping, we're going to make a different kind of bow, which is the bow for making the fire for the bow drum. In this case, the Egyptian drum. So you get one of these planks that you're able to buy at a specialty bamboo store, and you just split them down because the grain goes straight down. It's a grass, and you just make yourself one of these bows that fits nicely into your hand, just like that. And I even have this one tapered a little bit to kind of show that this is the base and this is the tip. And the nocks in this are really just single cuts that go in here for simplicity, really. So I don't have to mess with a hole like this one. So this is that Osage orange bow that broke. You can see the handle here. That was for the bow. Somewhere it's snapped down here. Okay. And so we put a hole down here for the cord, and this bow still has the nocks in it for where a bowstring would go for an arrow bowstring. Okay, and I made the string much like a bow and arrow bowstring, where you just slip that onto the nocks and it just sits on there like that. And again, this cord is twice the length of the bow itself, as I'll show you. So it goes 1, 2. Okay, so your cord is at least twice the length of the bow. Okay. Now, if you need a solid bow and you're not readily, what's not readily available is a good solid branch or bamboo, which is my favorite, which I recommend, or a broken bow. I recommend a hickory maul handle. And so these run about $10. Now when you buy these, make sure the grain goes straight down and doesn't come out, that the grain doesn't run out. You gotta kind of have to look at your wood all the time, like as if you're selecting to make a bow. You don't want the grain to run out. You always want your grain nice and straight and to run down the length of the wood that you're choosing. So that's what this is here. And as an example, what I've done is I've cut 8 inches off the top here, and the reason for that is because your bow needs to be arm's length. Okay, so I cut this much off here of this one here. This got cut off, and then I got my table saw, circular saw, and I ran it down and I split it in half. So here I have 2 halves of a maul handle. Okay, this is the unfinished one. It still has the labels on it, and it also still has the polyurethane coating on it. And here I've sanded down the other one, took off the polyurethane, and put 2 slit nocks in it on each side, just like the bamboo one. Okay, and I kind of just put a marker line around one side, just to kind of show which side is going to be the base where I'm going to hold. And it says hickory down here, in case someone else picks this up and wonders what the wood is. So it's hickory. Again, the cord is twice the length of the bow. At least, at a minimum. Okay? So we're going to string that. Alright? And here you have a cone shape, or a triangle. Alright? A rather long one. And a solid bow is very important. It's important that your bow has no flex. Okay? And it's not very thin. This is for a bow drill. This is for an Egyptian drill. Okay. Let's put this aside. Which one should I do first? Actually, let's do the Osage Orange bow. And our example is going to be, we're going to start off with something simple. We're going to start off with cedar. Just to go over the basics and the science of it. Okay, how it's done. Move my stuff over. Alright, so how do you string this? Alright, so here's how I like to string an Egyptian bow. Alright, now I'm right-handed, so I put the handle of the bow on my right side. Okay, now you have to know how to, there's actually 3 ways to really string your spindle. One is to just wrap it a few times down, and again when you wrap it, the cord has to come off the back side of the spindle. Remember when we did the bow drill, the cord comes off closest to the bow, okay? It doesn't come off where the spindle is closer to the bow. This is not what we want, okay? Again, what we want is the cord coming off closest to the bow, this way, all right? And also when we string, we have to keep in mind that the bow tip is going to be up. Okay, so when we string, the string, when we go up, okay, that's where the bow tip is going to be. When we string down, okay, that's where the bottom of the bow is. Okay, so let's start again. So we make our triangle, okay? This is one way to string. There's really kind of 3 ways to string this thing. So we touch the spindle to, okay, so the base end of the spindle is toward me, okay, and the brace end is going out, okay, like this. So we touch the spindle to the cord, and what I'll in the middle of the spindle, and what I'll do is from the bottom I'll wrap around 1, and from the top I'll wrap around 1, and from the bottom I'll wrap around 1, and from the top I'll wrap around 1, from the bottom I'll wrap around 1, and the top I'll wrap around 1, the bottom and the top. Okay, now we're starting to get near center. Now what you don't want to do is to have the spindle actually go past center. Okay, so we're going to do 1 more on the bottom, and still it goes this way. So we're going to do 1 more on the top. We're going to put that together. See that? See all those wraps? Now you can see that it comes off on the top toward the top of the bow. And it comes off the bottom toward the bottom of the bow, facing downward on an angle, like this, because it's going to be held like this. Alright? And we don't want the spindle actually going past center. Okay, so that's the tension that we want, is we don't want it to go past. We want it to at the most end up being straight. Actually being a little bit this way is actually a little better, so that the tension is correct, because it's going to have a little bit of slack to begin with. Okay, so this is one way to string. The other way to string, or the second way, is to make a clove hitch. Now, how I do a clove hitch, if you're still not clear on this, by the way, just go to YouTube and someone will show you how to do it up close and personal. But I'll try and do that with you anyway. So from here, with my right hand, okay, holding the cord, I go forward, toward, out, and catch a loop like that. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do is do that again, except the loop is going to be toward me. So I'm going to make another loop, but not put it behind this one. I'm going to put it in front of it, this way, okay, and hold it open. And then the spindle is going to go, because the right side, my right side, because I'm right-handed, the bottom of the bow is on that same side. The brace end of the spindle goes through, and the base end is toward me. And then I find the center of the cone like that. Okay? So we have a clove hitch around the center of the spindle. Okay? And it's about in the middle of the cord. Now from here we start to do the same thing. I do one wrap down, one wrap up, one wrap down, one wrap up, one wrap down, one wrap up, one wrap down, one wrap up. And from there, get everything together and then see what your tension is like. And that's just about right. Just like that. We have an angle. It wraps up to the bow tip and wraps down to the bottom of the bow, held like this. Now the last one is apparently historically a lot of times the Egyptians might have drilled a hole through the spindle, and before they strung the bow they would string through the spindle, and then from there they would tie it to the bow, and then they would wrap it up and down. But I really don't see the necessity for it unless you're truly afraid of losing your spindle somewhere. Now when you're doing the bow drill, obviously with the tension on that, they're known to flip off. Okay? With the Egyptian method, at least the way that it's done, there's real no chance of it like going flying. Okay, so I like the first two methods. Either just I wind up and down, okay, or I put a clove hitch in it. But for this first demonstration, we're just going to wind up and down without a clove hitch. Okay. And I think we're ready. So we have a solid bow, a long cord, a tall spindle, and a spindle that's not going to break. Okay? So our base and our spindle are already mated, and it's cedar, so we know this is probably going to light very easily. But you should see the form as to how it's done. Before we get into more complicated things. Alright, I'm going to take my shoe off for this one. Alright, and I'm trying an experiment. I bought a pack of hockey pucks to use as pressure hand braces. And I'm finding that they work very well, except the rubber still burns. So what I would do is drill a hole and put in maybe like a copper cap, just to keep the rubber from burning. But here I just have a lot of grease, and I haven't put a copper cap in. Okay, so this is a hockey puck. All right, here we go. As you can see, the cord in fact, we're going to do one more turn on there for more tension. Make these adjustments as you go. Alright. There we go. There, that one's even better. Now the cord has no chance of slipping, as you can see. No chance. And you can see the necessity for the tall spindle. The bow stays on an angle. You can see the cord riding up and down. Okay. Again, the principle is the same. Use the whole length of the cord on the bow. Now, if I were to apply a whole lot of pressure with my body weight, okay, it would make it harder to turn the spindle. But because the cord is really bound around, and I have a solid bow, it makes it much easier for me to keep the spindle moving. So with all this pressure, I can still turn the spindle. But if I just had a regular bow with a regular cord going around once and a flexible bow, I probably couldn't get away with it. Okay. All right, but we expected to get that right because it's cedar. But we're going over the basic science of it. All right. So, remember our pad pie problem? Assess, diagnose, plan, implement, and evaluate. So our problem is that, let's say we have woods, which we're going to go over, that are really tough to do. Okay? They're on the Jonka hardness tests, they're really high. Their number's really high, they're really hard, so we can't really do it with a bow drill. So when we look at our devices, okay, we have a solid bow. We have a very long cord, okay? We have a very solid, tall spindle, okay? Now by looking at these compared to your average bow drill, your diagnosis should be that this is used for harder woods that require more pressure, because these devices together should enable you through a technique to get that wood going, okay, in theory. So the plan is to be able to figure out how to put these together correctly, pull off the technique, implement that, okay, actually do it, which we just did, and evaluate. Here's our evaluation right there. All right, that's from going right to left, because we're going from structure, okay, these recognizing, trying to understand, identify what these pieces mean, these devices mean, and understand their function. So this is the science of the basic form, okay? All right, Let's do another one. Let's do bamboo, but we're going to change it up a little bit. I'm going to show you a different kind of base, which is really not my favorite, but I'm going to show it to you anyway. You may have fun playing with it too. Alright, so I'll show you that, and I'll show it to you with the bamboo bow. And then we're going to move on to some harder stuff. Alright, here's the bamboo. There's a kind of base that I haven't mentioned yet. I didn't do it before. Not one of my favorites. It's called the split stick method. Sometimes you just take a branch and you split it down the middle, and obviously at one end you have to tie it down so that it doesn't split all the way, and then it's wedged open with either a piece of wood or a pebble or something like that. And again, it's secured because that two ends being loose, they're going to move, and that would not be very stable. So it's secured on both ends, propped open here with a small piece of bamboo. This is Western red cedar. And what happens is you drill on both sides of the base, which is cracked open, and a coal is supposed to form in between, and it does work. Actually, this base is what's usually used for the fire thong, which we're going to go over later, which is a linear method, but I don't really like it for the drill method. If you have a solid spindle, what happens a lot of times is you actually just drill right into the crack. You drill into the space, which is exactly why you don't have your notch go all the way into the hole to begin with, because what happens is you drill into the notch. Well, this is basically the notch going all the way through. And so what I highly recommend is that your spindle be hollow on some level, even if you have to drill it out. Because what happens is that dead space center that's in the spindle drills right into the space. And of course that's not good. So we're going to use a tube of bamboo for the spindle, doing this Egyptian drill method. Now I'm using a bow of very stiff bamboo. This is the bamboo again that you would use for making Japanese bows. It's the really thick walled bamboo. Highly recommend it, and my favorite bow too, by the way. So again, this is strung around. It has a clove hitch notch in the middle. Alright, and the bottom is wrapped around 4 times, and the top is around 4 times. And of course the top of the bow is spun upward, and the bottom of the bow is spun downward, because it's held like this, because the tip of the bow is going to be up. So therefore the cord on the spindle needs to be up. Alright, so we're going to give this a shot. I'm going to wear a shoe, and we're going to be using our hockey puck pressure hand brace for this one. So let's give it a go here. It hasn't been mated, but it has been a little, the sides of the base are carved out. Okay, if you could see that. Alright, let's give this a shot. warm it up first. Again, use the whole length of the bow. Alright, let's see how we did. Alright, round two. Again, not my favorite. There we go. Getting this stable. Oop. That's not stable, right? To get this mated too while we're at it. I'm going to use less pressure and more speed this time. And we have a success. There is a coal in there. If I don't destroy it. Okay. Probably see the smoke right there. We have a glow. All right. Again, not my favorite. Alright, so for our next part, we're going to try to do those woods during our bow drill section that we did not get a coal with. Instead, we got those black striated coal dust piles, but did not ignite, right? So let's say that the woods were too hard for me to be able to do that with a bow drill technique. Well, we need to change our technique. So hence we're going to do this through the Egyptian drill method. Okay, so the ones we didn't get were I think chestnut, sassafras, and swamp maple. So what we're going to do is the first one we're going to do is the chestnut. Chestnut is lower on the Jonka scale. I think it runs something like 500 or 600, but still this chestnut wasn't left out in the elements for a long period. It was cut green and recently during the summer, and so it didn't even really have that much time to season, so it's still rather hard. Didn't have time to degrade with any kind of bacterial action, or the rain and the elements. Hasn't been out that long. So the base too is made from the same wood under the same conditions. So it's a pretty tough wood. But some of the other things that we're going to be going over too is reloading spindles. You remember that from the bow drill. Well, we have the same thing here for the woods that we're going to use. Here's a reloader of oak, taken from an oak dowel I got at the hardware store, with a reload of chestnut. Okay. Also, what we're going to do is the sassafras, have a plug reload of sassafras there, with a walnut reloader spindle. Okay, and we're going to do that on a board of sassafras, obviously. And we're also going to do the swamp maple on a board of swamp maple with a reloading spindle of hickory. Alright. As you can see, this one's rather large. I got some other ones that were made out of some other woods. This one's made out of rattan, okay, for a reload. This one's made out of ash, and it's actually made from a replacement handle that you get at the hardware store for things like shovels. So they have replacement handles made of hickory and ash. So if you want those woods, you can get them there. And remember to sight down them so that the grain is straight when you buy them. All right. And I have some other ones too, but that's good for now. I think you get the idea. So let's do the chestnut. And I'll show you what these other reloads are in a little while. Okay. Leave them for a surprise for later. We're going to use our maul handle hickory bow. Okay. So we're going to string this with the clove hitch knot. And let me go to you and show you how this is done. Alright, give me a second. Alright, so here's our string, right? Well, what I do is I take my right hand and put it behind my left and hold that and pinch that, okay? Then I take another loop, turn it behind, but the loop goes in front of the first loop and pinch that. And then we hold that open. And that is the clove hitch that we want. Okay? So I'm going to go back around. And we're going to do this right on the table. Alright, so we're ready to do our chestnut. As you can see from the photos, the reload is a branch of the chestnut. Here the base is going to be a multiple hole, And I only have this much here to be able to step on. It's going to slide around on the table. So I've nailed down the front end. We're going to use our hockey puck pressure hand brace. We're going to use the Osage bow, half bow, and we're going to do the just wraparound method without a clove hitch and without putting a hole in the spindle, obviously. So let's do that. We make our triangle and we touch our spindle to the cord, okay, right on top. The brace end is sticking out, the base end is toward me, the reload. And we go down one, up one, down one, tuck everything together, up one, down one, up one, down one, up one. And I think we have just enough tension to do one more. We'll go down one. Actually, it's still too loose. See that? It's going past center. So we're going to do one more up. Yes, now the tension is just right, where it's not going past center and it's going to be on that nice angle that we want. Okay, spindle's nice and tall, so it should allow for a ride of the cord up and down. All right, I'm going to take my shoe off. All right, it's not mated. So we're going to mate it and just keep going all at the same time, this time out, and see how we do. So we're going to take a little bit to just get it warmed up. Use the whole cord. So those principles are the same. Oh. Slide out. Wrap that around. So this hockey puck should really have a cap in it, like a copper cap. Because really the rubber is burning. So really I'm just going to rest my body weight on my arm and just keep bowing. Because the cord is bound around so many times, the spindle has no choice but to really turn. So we're going to do more speed. Just keep going. Let's see how we did. we go. That took a while to form. There we go. Sorry that took a while to get it to form, but we definitely got it. Reload of Chestnut on an oak dowel reloader spindle. Okay. Base of Chestnut branch. Hockey puck, pressure hand brace, and this really should have an insert in it, like a copper cap, or maybe if you get a little fancy, an insert of soapstone or pipestone or something like that. Because really the rubber does burn, as you can see. Kind of makes a little bit of a mess. I'm going to keep using it right now though. Alright, let me show you the rest of the woods and let's move on. Let's keep going. Alright, so the next one we're going to do is sassafras. Board of sassafras with a notch on the side. Walnut reloader spindle with reload of sassafras. Okay. We're using the hickory bow again. And we're using the hockey puck for the pressure hand brace. I'm sorry the notch is not toward you. It's toward me. And again, this hasn't even been mated. I only just got the hole started. The board is really sliding a little bit on this table, which is really slippery. So I'm warming it up. What's nice about this whole technique is that the spindle is really forced to turn, to do that back and forth motion. Okay, it's warmed up, so we're just gonna go use the whole cord. Just gonna keep going. And let's see what we got. I have a cold forming, but I'm trying not to blow it away. And there's our sassafras. Sassafras reload, walnut reloader spindle. And there's our coal. Okay. Problem, the wood is very hard, so we need more pressure. So let's assess and diagnose our pieces. We have a solid bow. We have a spindle that's tall and won't break. We have an extra long cord. And with that, we create the Egyptian drill technique method. That's our diagnosis. So our plan is to bear down more pressure. Our technique is to bear down as much pressure as we can and just keep going, because the cord wrapped around the spindle multiple times will make the spindle spin, and the bow being solid will not lose tension because it won't flex, and we don't have to worry about the spindle breaking because it is solid walnut in this case. And because we were a bit better able to bear down more pressure and just keep going and going, here's our coal. So we implemented that, and here's our evaluation. Our result is a coal. Whereas with the bow drill, we didn't get it that time. Okay? Alright, on to the next one. Alright, so our next one is swamp maple. Now, apparently this maple is on the Jonka test in the 900s. By the way, the chestnut, if I didn't clarify, is supposed to be somewhere in the 500s. The sassafras, which you just saw, is supposed to be somewhere in the 600s. Alright, so we're going up the scale of the Jonka test, obviously. So here we have our hickory reload spindle with the reload of swamp maple, with a swamp maple base. Now this base is very small, and it's going to slide on this table. So I've done what I did before and kind of nailed down the front end. I'm going to hold the back end down with my shoe. Alright. Now we're going to do the clove hitch. So we're going to do a loop, do another loop, but put it in front. Hold that open, slide the brace end in, get our triangle kind of equally, and then we're going to put the knot in the middle. We're going to go down one, we're going to go up one, we're going to go down one, we're going to go up one, and I think we only have room to do one more. So I think we're going to go up one, and we're going to get the tension on that. Okay, just right. All right, you can see it's on an angle with the tension. All right, and again we're going to use our hockey puck pressure hand brace. The surface area 2 of this reload is bigger than the first two, so we're going to need to do some really mean cranking here. Get as much pressure as we can. Let's get this warmed up. Get a rhythm going. This solid bow is not giving away any tension. The cord is really binding around the spindle, so it really makes it turn. So I'm bearing down more pressure, giving some speed. We're just going to keep going. see how it did. And we got us a coal. Even though it's all black striations, it's still got a coal to form. Whoops. You can see it glowing right there, I hope. It's right there. You see it glowing? Right here. I kind of blew it apart, but it's still there. You can see it smoldering. Alright, so, and that is our science of the basic form. Assess, well, problem, assess, diagnose, plan, implement, and evaluate. So, by looking at our pieces, we see that this is set up for A, and the diagnosis is an Egyptian drill, okay, method, technique. Our plan is to bear down more pressure with that technique because the wood is harder, okay, because we can't do it with a bow drill. We implemented that, you saw that I did it, and our evaluation is a coal. All right, so I think we're ready to move on to kind of a advanced part, art of the variation. And what we're going to do is move up in wood hardness that we wouldn't normally do. Okay, let's try some experiments. Here we go. All right, and welcome to the art of the variation section of the Egyptian drill, of the bow drill. And just so I'm, just for clarity, the chestnut, the diameter of the reload of that is 5/8 of an inch. And the sassafras was 1/2 inch, and the swamp maple reload was 3/4 of an inch. And also they're all hardwoods. So remember, all the principles apply. All 22 principles still apply of our equation. So due to the hardness, I wanted to reduce the surface area. So just so we're clear on that, all of these hardwoods that we're using, I'm hollowing out to get rid of the dead space center. Okay, just for clarity, just so you don't think that it's like a trick or anything like that. Okay, and you would want to do that anyway to get a fire started. I mean, I can't see any reason why you would choose to keep the dead space center on something so hard to begin with. Okay, that's really just unreasonable, in my opinion. So our goal really is to balance everything out. So those are the sizes of those reloads, of their diameters, and they're all hollowed out. okay, to reduce the surface area and get rid of that dead space. So, you know that old saying, everything in moderation. Well, so let me tell you about what my favorite kind of bow drill is, actually. My favorite kind of bow drill is actually the middle between the bow drill and the Egyptian drill. So what I like to do is just have, usually you'll find a stiff bow more than you'll find a flexible bow. And if I had my choice, I would always choose a solid bow over a flexible bow, if I could, if I had to. But the other thing is that the cord that I like is not twice the length of the bow, but about 1.5. And then what I'll do is I'll do something in between, like I said, a bow drill and a Egyptian drill, where I don't have to worry really about the springy tension of a bow drill, and getting the length of the cord exactly just right so that it wraps around once and it has that kind of flip feeling to it. So what I like to do is really just do the wrap, but only a few times, and then it's always just right. I don't have to really worry about the tension, because I only have to just wrap it around maybe one more time. And you can see here it wraps around 4 times, okay, on this spindle. And this is one of the first reloads I've ever made. This is that the Lignum Vitae, the official one, by the way, that I really like. This is really one of my favorites. Indestructible. So, and then there's the first one, which was made by Dan Stanchfield, that I collected out of solid Osage orange, which is really carved. I mean, you can see the knife cuts on it, which is really nice. This one was made, by the way, on a lathe, which I'm gonna go over in a little while. All right. So really, that's if I had to do a bow drill, that's the bow drill I would do, is one in between. And so I'm going to show you some examples of that with some hardwoods. But first, I also want to show you that the Egyptian bow design was a solid bow, but it was also carved. This also came from my friend Dan Stanchfield. And as you can see, he drilled a hole through the handle. Okay? He drilled a hole through the handle and through the top here. And so this is a tiny Egyptian drill. And this is the smaller Osage Orange Reload spindle that he had made with a reload of yucca. And I'm going to show you that real quick on our little bamboo base. Okay. I'm going to use the Osage Orange pressure hand brace for that. I'm going to adjust the camera and I'm going to show you that right now. Alright, so with this tiny little one, again, the base of the bow is on my right side because I'm right-handed, and we're just going to touch that. We're going to wrap down toward the base end, and we're going to wrap up toward the brace end and the tip of the bow, like we did before. And we're going to wrap one more up, we'll say. Get everything together as best we can in the middle. And this is going to slide around because it's so small, so it's nailed down. And I'm going to pick that one right there. I'm going to warm this up. And we're just going to go. All right, and there we go. As you can see, that worked very well. This Egyptian bow carved is 11 inches long. Okay, 11 inches. And that was 3 wraps around on an Osage Orange reloader spindle. This reloader spindle, by the way, is well, the middle is about ½ an inch. The middle of that spindle is about ½ an inch. Okay. Reload of yucca, bamboo base, and as you can see, that went very well. All right, next one. All right, so that carved Egyptian bow, you'll see a bunch of examples if you go online and in your search engine or Google Egyptian bow drill. You'll see some examples of some solid carved bows. All right. The other thing too is the northern peoples like the Inuit, they had very intricate and elegant bows made of ivory. So you'll see some of those too, and you'll also see them if you go to like a museum, the Museum of Natural History, which I love to go to. You see some intricately well carved works of art over there as well. So where are we at? So we we give credit to and we thank Mr. John Olson, the man whom I've never met, for disseminating the information regarding the Egyptian drill. It's helped my method and technique and my ability to teach other people, so thank you. Now I want to give credit and thank a very good friend of mine, Barry Keegan, who I think I had mentioned earlier. Barry, many years ago, probably close to 15 years ago, I think actually maybe 20, he came over one day to the school we were teaching at, and he kind of just showed a few of us how he did a hickory bow drill. If you don't know, hickory is horribly hard. It's very high on the Jonka scale. It's over 2,000. But he demonstrated and showed us his method for that. And what he did was he got a very thick spindle of hickory, and then he shouldered it so that it looked like something like this, like it had a reload, except this was entirely one piece. He had carved it from one piece. So what he basically demonstrated to us was the principle of torque. Now torque is, if you look it up, the definition for that is turning force, which is very important. So one of the reasons why we're doing the Egyptian drill method as a variation is because it gives us a lot of torque. It gives us a lot of turning force as compared to the bow drill, which loses tension and the cord is only wrapped around and bound around only once. So the Egyptian method provides much torque. What will make more torque is a larger spindle, larger diameter. and the diameter of the reload, or at least the bottom portion, the bait where it meets the base, is a little smaller. Again, we're back to that bicycling uphill and changing gears kind of scenario, where you switch gears on your 10-speed and you're pedaling and pedaling and pedaling what seems like a lot, and it seems very easy, but you're going a little slower because the larger diameter spindle is going to make the smaller diameter insert, the reload, spin slower. Okay, because it's the outside that spins the fastest, and the inside spins the slowest. So if the larger diameter spindle is spinning the fastest, the inside smaller diameter reload is spinning slower. So you have to really make that up with speed. But the idea here really too is that we're able to apply a lot of pressure, and the Egyptian drill method allows us to give a lot of force to be able to turn that spindle while we're bearing down on all that with all that pressure. Okay, so Barry Keegan, I'm going to credit with first showing me that principle of torque, and how he could apply more force to turn that spindle, to apply so much pressure that he can get a hickory bow drill spindle going on a base of hickory. It's amazing. So torque force we're going to put under the principles of both energy and back and forth motion. All right, under those two principles. It's not going to be its own principle because we're also dealing with linear methods in a little while, and all 22 principles have to apply. So what I'm going to do is show you another hardwood. And so basically what I've been showing you all along with the bow drill reloads, as well as these reloads, is you've been already seeing the principle of torque in play already, because the reloader spindles are larger than the diameter of the reloads. So we've already been using torque spindles. They're reload spindles, but they're torque spindles. All right, the Osage one, this one made of ash, and this really thick one made of rattan. All right, so we're going to do another one right now, and see if we can't get that one going. All right, and again, I'm going to use my moderated bow drill method between the Egyptian drill and the bow drill. All right, let's give it a shot. All right, so what I have here is American walnut. So I have a base of walnuts, which is actually a tree that we cut down in our front yard a few years ago, so this is well seasoned. As you can see, I have both the heartwood and the sapwood. There, the sapwood is the lighter wood, and the heartwood is the dark brown wood, which when you oil up and stain comes really dark. Looks really good. I have here the ash reloader torque spindle, we're going to call them now, with a reload of walnut insert. As you can see, it is hollowed, and right off the bat the diameter of it is 3/4 of an inch. We're going to do our moderated Egyptian bow drill method. All right, and it looks like we're going to do 4 turns on that. No clove hitch, just wraps around. All right. Now I'm going to pre-fill the notch a little bit with some old dust. I'm going to wear a shoe. Osage orange. Pressure hand brace. Whoops. That was another spindle. Alright. Too much pressure. It's already mated. I'm thinking I might have to support this board with a nail if it's too slippery. First we're going to warm it up real good. So we got a lot of torque. Put my whole body weight that I possibly can on this spindle, and it's just going to keep turning because it's bound around so many times with the cord. And a stiff bow which doesn't give up tension. Let's make it up with some speed. Let's see what we got. Well, that certainly looks like a cold me. Walnut on the Jonka scale, by the way, is 1010, approximately, obviously. Walnut reload, walnut base, ash reloader torque spindle, moderated Egyptian bow drill method, Osage orange pressure hand brace, alright, so this is art of the variation. And on our equation, we're going from left to right, because now we're just playing around, right? We already know all the parts and what they do. We understand structure and function. So now we're going from function to structure. We understand how things are supposed to work. So we're playing with the physicalness of things within our environment to see if we can get them to work. And this is really what makes friction firekeeping fun, is to see what you can do, see what you could pull off, and see how much you can learn. And the best part is, too, is passing it down to other people. Excellent. All right, let's keep playing. Next one.